So we've got this fairly large red oak in our front yard. We've had extensive tree work done to thin it out, and now it's time to cable it. I'm actually on the last cable, but I wanted to show you kind of a general idea from my perspective of how to properly do this. Now bear in mind, through my research, I found almost nothing online on how to do it. Just products really, some basic information, but nothing really helpful for me to design what I needed to design to deal with this tree. So it's incredibly important to make sure that your tree is really thinned out so you have room to move your ladders. I'm using 2 ladders in this case. I'm using one at the primary hinge point or access point, or not even access point, I should say, attachment point. And then the other one I move around a little bit more to get to the points of which I need to attach the branches. So I use Little Giant ladders. They're extremely easy to use, except to extend fully. To make them really, really long, it becomes dangerous. So these ladders are not for the faint at heart. These are the biggest ladders made by Little Giant. They are very old, but still very good condition. I don't even have a label to tell you which type they are, but I think they're a 26, model 26, if I'm not mistaken. So what I've done here, I'm gonna walk you around and show you a little bit, is I've got, you wanna find your single most vertical, strongest trunk, which is that one. And at this point, I have attached these lag hooks. I get these from an arborist company. I do not buy them at Home Depot. They're expensive, but they're worth it. And then I have chose to go with, I think it's 3/8 inch cable. It's stranded stainless steel wire. I got that off of Amazon because stainless steel, unless it's real garbage, is going to last. And then I also got these swedges and the little horseshoes that go inside the loop off Amazon as well. Again, I'm not real concerned about quality on those because they're pretty much, can't kill them, can't do anything wrong with them. So the concept here is to find your vertical most point, your strongest point, and to also not attach these above any, within, I should say, any of these crotches. That's a crotch. That's a crotch. So your crotches are your weak points. Your crotches are where a lot of your branches will split and crack. So if you look out over my driveway, you can see that I've got some susceptible vehicles underneath these areas. So the idea here was to simply bring a cable across and attach it to that centralized point in the middle of the tree. So that's the idea here. That's the one going out over the driveway. You can also take a single attachment point and tether other branches to it. You don't have to use a single attachment point, but you've got to be clear of the limbs. The limbs cannot be within several inches. I would say probably 8 inches to a foot of any of the other branches, because otherwise through wind-blown tree movement you can get rubbing and that can damage your tree. Okay, so we'll move on to how to cut the cable and how to deal with the cable. What I do is I go ahead and make a corner, make an end rather, and by doing so I have an end cable piece. I'll bring that over and show it to you. This is what I want it to look like when I'm done. Maybe wrong, but it's what I do. I've got the little horseshoe in here. I've got the stranded cable that goes around it, and then I've got these big 3/8 inch heavy aluminum wedges that crush against the, come on camera, I'm not going to show you. There you go. They crush against the stainless steel cable, and they bite against those strands, and they will not let go. They're extremely tight. So that's how you make an end. So I make a beginning end, and then I hook that on the lag bolt. Come on, the lag bolt at the primary vertical point. Then I stretch out the cable to the other point, branch point. Go ahead and drill that hole, and here I'm using a, I believe this is a Milwaukee I use Milwaukee tools because they're the best. This is a Milwaukee, that's a 3/8 inch auger. What I do is I drill in and out and in and out. I'll drill in some and I'll drill out some, and in some and out some to pull that material out of the hole. Otherwise, these self-tapping ends like this, they can really take a bite and not let go. And if you get that sucker in there too deep, it's not coming out. So work it a little at a time. You really want to get the hole. You want to get the hole as deep as the threads. You're not going to go all the way in most cases, but this leaves you the opportunity to go all the way in if you do create a cable that's too long. I typically only go in about 1/3 to 1/2, but that leaves me the rest of the thread point. But that's why drilling the depth of the bit, which I do in this case, I'll drill all the way up to here. That way I've got that possibility of sinking the lag bolt even further in if I have to. Okay, so as far as making the end, after hooking this piece in to the vertical support component of the tree, I will stretch it out and I will find the length and I'll bend it, which creates a little bit of a mark on the cable. But I bend it to where, let's say this is in the tree all the way to here. Actually, I just barely started in the tree. Let's say it's that much in just to hold it in place. I will take this hook point and not do it there. I will bring it to here so that I've got plenty of room. If you cut that cable short, it's gone. You can't use it. You have to start all over again. If it's a little longer, you've got this distance of your threads to take up, and that's a good 3.5, 4 inches in most cases. So what you want to do here is you want to bend this piece with your hands. With your hands like this. Bend it when you're up in the tree, making your mark on the cable. That's how you mark the cable. And then you've got to make sure that you follow your cable here all the way around, and you're not cutting the wrong side of the hook. So following that around here, this is the piece I want to cut. Now I'm going to cut it probably about 4 inches back, but that allows me to make my bend and secure everything properly. I use these Milwaukee cutters. They are not really for this job, but they work. I suggest that if you're going to do a lot of this cabling, you get a much better cutter than this, but this will work for me. The trick with this is you got to get it all the way back in the jaws. If you're up here, it will not cut it. It's got to be all the way back. So making sure you've got enough loop material to make the horseshoe and the swedges, then you're in good shape. So what I'm going to do is cut this. If you're lucky enough to get it like that, you're in good shape. You might have to cut a few extra stragglers just to make sure you've got good cuts. You do not want this to unravel. If this unravels, you're in trouble, hence the electrical tape. If you do get an unravel, you can take about 1 inch of this tape, really not more, on 3/8 inch material. And if you look at the stranded material, it's wrapped this way. So if you take your tape, you put it up here just short of the tip. See there? Some sticking out. Just short of the tip. And you put electrical tape's really good for all kinds of purposes because it's stretchable and you can put tension on it as you wrap it around. So if you hold it with this finger and then wrap it around, you see the cable strands through it. That's how tight you're getting it. And extend it over, wrapping it, twisting it, twisting it, twisting it. Now this will fit through. Now the trick about putting it in a swedge is making sure you spin it in the direction that the cables go. So go back, set it in there, and then spin it, and it goes right in. Okay? That's if you get a frayed end. Otherwise, if you got enough cable, just cut a section off and start over. Okay, so going back to this guy. You don't want that bend to be over bent, I guess you should say. because otherwise you can't get this wedge over it when you want to loop these in. So I've got a little bit of a fray here, but I think I can sneak it on. So I'm going to go in the direction of the cable. That one went in perfect. That one went in well. Okay, I'm going to hang out of that. I'm going to try not to fray this end as I handle this cable. I'm going to pull it through this bend point, but instead of trying to force it through here, I'm going to run it way out. I'm going to get a lot of extra cable on it, because the further out that I go from this loop, the bigger I make this loop, the less these end strands are going to try to unravel. If I try to do that too tight of a loop, they're going to start unraveling because of the tension on the loop. And the trick here to get both these to go in easily is to line them up, have them in alignment, so that once you get your first one in, assuming I don't come apart, let me twist it up so I got a better angle here. Then it should slide right into the other if they are butt to butt. There we go. So butt to butt. These have to be aligned perfectly for that to slide right in, and bingo, there it is. Then what you do is you want to bring it to this horseshoe point. So you can literally hold it here and just pull out the loop, feeding it through so you don't lose any of what you've accomplished with your wedges. Now the length of the excess here is really not that important. All I'm really trying to do here is to cover that in so there's nothing that's going to poke me when I'm dealing with it, and make sure my horseshoe has room to drop into place. So there's your horseshoe. You loop that sucker in, take off some tension, fit it in there. The reason you want a horseshoe is because it takes the wear and tear off the edge of the cable. What I do here is I just push these two together, and that'll close the gap around the horseshoe. You got to be real careful with these ends. They will cut the crap out of you. So once you've got this pulled in as tight as you can get it, you basically put it on a piece of concrete or a rock or a piece of metal, a railroad tie, anvil, something like that. And what I do is I'll whack just this first one here. That kind of sets it. Then I can move this to cover my split ends. Smash them both totally flat, flip it over, smash them totally flat. All right, now my cable should be the proper length. We'll go up and mount it next. What I'm doing now is this is a little different for what I've explained before, because this is my last cable. This is a supporting vertical branch here. It's a fairly substantial one, and I'm supporting this crotch here from two different points. I'm supporting it at three different angles actually. I'm coming back to the main vertical here, and I'm also coming out from there to this little one sticking out over my driveway. But this is going to be my attachment point to a larger one here. You see the bolt? So I'm about to go up and I'm going to set that one. You can see how far it's sticking out because it's just barely stuck in the tree right now. So my goal here at this next step is to go from that position to the one I just showed you. Now, I always have the issue with the length of the cable being unmanageable, really. If it's a short cable, it's really easy to do, hook both ends, but in this case, I've got a really long cable of about 11 feet that I've got to get from one anchor point to another. So what I do is I take a string and I put a loop in it, and then I will loop that string through, pull it, go ahead and close the loop, and then by doing that it gives me the opportunity to use my string as a guide to pull the cable in place. See there? Now I got my string attached to my loop. I can very easily pull it loose. So I will walk the string up the ladder to that anchor point, and I'll have the cable in hand. One thing important about setting your anchors is the anchors should be as directly in line with the tension as possible. The reason I say that is because if we set, come on, it's too tight, there we go. If we set this at this angle so to speak, and then try to pull it this direction, then we're gonna damage the tree because we're putting this type of pressure on it. If we anchor it straight in line with the tension, then we're pulling the tree along the entire length of the drilled hole, this direction. So I'm going directly that way to my primary anchor point. Another thing to consider, the reason I order these from arborist supply companies is because the threads of the primary anchor point should go in the reverse direction of the threads at the secondary anchor point. And the reason you want to do that is it acts as a turnbuckle. So as you want to tension up the cable, you can turn each one of these into the tree trunk branch, and it will shorten that cable. It'll pull it in each direction. One goes one way, one goes the other. It's a basic turnbuckle concept. I just grabbed a 1 1/16" combination wrench. You can use the circular end of a crescent wrench. Whatever you have that has length to it is what you want, because you want to be able to have the leverage to come around and turn that thing. Now I can tell you this, being on a ladder, especially at the tip top of the ladder on a branch that may be swaying, this is probably the most dangerous part, is driving this anchor into the branch, because you're putting a lot of force and effort on it when you make these turns, and you can easily slip off. So make certain that as you're making each one of these turns, that this is fit right inside there. I even put my other hand on here to make sure that it's staying in place when I do my turn. If that slips off, you can easily lose your balance and fall off the ladder and die, which we don't want. So that's the idea here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get my cable set up, and then I'll show you a little bit on how to drive it in. I have used my string to pull it up so I can handle this end. And you can see I've got quite a ways to go from here to there inside. But the trick to making sure it's long enough is this. If you don't have it long enough, it's not gonna go in. So in that case, you've got to pull the bolt out, which I'm gonna do anyway, because I use that to counter tension my cable before I attach it back in and start spinning it down. What I mean by counter tension is this particular, I gotta hang on to the cable on my phone at the same time. This particular anchor is a clockwise anchor. That's tightening, that's loosening. So if I'm gonna tighten this thing in and tension it up, I'm gonna put on a cable with no tension on it, all these strands are equal in tension. I wanna keep that. So if I'm gonna estimate that I've gotta screw this thing in 20 turns, then I've got to turn this cable counterclockwise 20 turns. Because if this goes clockwise to anchor, turning it counterclockwise will offset the tension. I will create reverse tension on this cable, so that when I stick it back in that hole and I start screwing it down, when I'm done, I should have the least amount of negative tension as possible on this cable. The way the cables are stranded right now is the way I want them to be. I don't want them to loosen. I don't want them to be tight. I've got a spot right here where I didn't do that very well. It's not my roof, that's the actual cable, and it buckled. I don't care, because it's a very short piece. It is just kind of a secondary or tertiary, really, type, see how short that is, type support. So going back to here, what I'm going to do is I don't have enough hands to videotape this, but I'm going to back this out. I'm going to turn it 20 times counterclockwise, and then when I set that back in to the hole, it's going to have this pretty decent tension going clockwise, and that's actually going to help me start it by the cable turning it as I push it in. And then I'm going to use this guy to tighten it up. I'm not going to do that while I'm videotaping because I already explained that it's very dangerous and you want all the hands you got. So I'll show it to you when I'm done. Okay. Back tension on the cable so you can see how kind of wavy it is. You don't want any kinks. If you got a kink in there, you need to work it out. Otherwise, you're going to have the same situation I showed you earlier. Be careful around your hair and skin with these cables. When these cables open up like this, come on, focus. When these cables open up, they will get your hair in there and they'll hang on to it. So it'll rip hair out. Even tiny hairs against your skin or the back of your neck, you'll know it. It's going to feel like something's grabbing you. So keep your body away from these cables, especially when they're split open like this. Here, we're ready to start cranking it down. So what I do is I use my wrench and I will start cranking it. Like I said, I don't do this with the camera in my hand. It's probably best to develop a system, which I'm getting away from here. My system is to do one full turn as far as possible, come back around, grab it again, and make another full 360-degree turn, and then grab it again, make a 360-degree turn. So I'm going to screw this guy in and I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. Hopefully I have my length and tension correct. Okay, so here I've got my tension. I couldn't really go any further into this because of the angle of the trunk. This end cap here was starting to hit here, and I didn't want to damage the tree, so I'm going to fix this by the other side. When we go to the end of this cable, you follow it all the way down, I'm going to take that hook down there and I'm going to bend it to create a little more tension. One important thing to remember, it's really critical, is you don't want this to be tight. This is a support cable, not a tension cable, so to speak. You got to give this branch the ability to move, or you're going to potentially cause other issues. So don't get them tight. Leave a little bit of play. Each cable should have a little bit of play. Now, depending on what you're trying to accomplish, that one right there that's going out over my tree, oh, excuse me, my tree. That tree that's going out over my roof, that roof that's going out over the tree, I don't want to fall in, right? So I would probably put a little more tension on that one, as well as this one going out over my wife's car. So those you may, keep a little tighter, but these others, these need to be a little loose. Now this one's too loose, but that's because I screwed it up and I made it too long. But when I turn that hook down there, it's going to take tension out of this line and out of this line, and it should do so proportionately. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, because this cable is the last one I put on, and this cable is the other one that has the most slack in it. I'm going to basically just take this hook nose and I'm going to pull it around. What that'll do is it'll take those two and it'll create tension on them. So as I do that, don't fall to let me switch hands. As I do that, you can watch it actually close that tension. Now what I've done is I've really created too much tension on this one, but I've left this one probably too loose. So I'm actually going to go over to that end and I'm going to tighten it up some more because that's just too loose. I don't think I helped this line at all by making this bend, but I did help this one. So I'm actually going to come off just a little because I got, I believe, to be too much tension. There we go. That's a little better. Little guitar string, but not too tight. All right, I'm gonna go tighten that one up and then I'll show you something else. It does have a lot of meat left that I can drive that bolt into. This is a fairly small branch, so I'm not really an advocate of burying a bolt into a branch like this. If I think it would be more logical to not go further than halfway through a branch. Something to understand though, sorry, I just climbed this ladder, is that the trees grow from the inside out. So what's going to happen is as this tree ages one more year, it's going to start filling in around here. One more layer. And then next year, one more layer, and it'll actually start growing out on this, grabbing more of the material. That's why you don't necessarily want to drive this thing home, but you also don't want to drive it too far through on a small branch like this. This is the smallest branch I'm cabling, and I'm really only doing so because it's over the street where I do park cars. So I'm going to tension that one up, and I'll be back. Okay, well, I didn't get it as tight as I wanted to, but it's probably better that I didn't. I only got about 2 more turns on it because it's biting into that wood so strongly. I was putting enormous effort just to get it to turn. So nonetheless, it being a very long, thin branch, very long, thin branch, the longest actually, and the thinnest that I'm cabling, I'm not too worried about it. I think it needs more slack as opposed to more tension, because it's gonna move a lot more than these thicker, sturdier branches. All right, so I got my wrench in hand. I'm gonna look down on the ground. I'm gonna throw it down because I don't need to carry it. If you're afraid of heights, you really might not want to do this. I'm probably 22 feet off the ground at the moment, as you can see. No, probably 20. But if you're afraid of heights, or you don't do ladder work, you probably might not want to do this. You might want to hire a professional tree trimming company that specializes in anchoring too. Most of them can do it, but the goal of this video is really to help you understand what my opinion is, which is not a professional opinion or an experienced opinion, on how to cable this tree and support it. We've got, or we have had, a massive snowmageddon 2 years ago, 3 years ago maybe, no, 2 years ago. And we've also had a massive ice storm last year, as well as a drought this summer, a substantial drought in Texas. So these trees are suffering. They're going through an enormous amount of stress, and you might not even know that these trees are sick until years after disease has set in. One thing important to note too is that this is a red oak, right? It's different from a white oak. That's an escarpment oak or a Texas live oak. Those Texas live oaks are susceptible to oak wilt virus. Red oaks carry it. They're a host for oak wilt. So typically what happens with oak wilt is the beetles that bore into the wood of trees to lay their eggs will do so in the springtime. And so I say from January to July, but most of the professionals say from Valentine's Day to June, don't trim your oak trees. It's also incredibly important to dress each of the wounds. It's a dressed wound. It's basically painted. Some guys use paint. I use Spectracide. It's designed specifically for the use of protecting those wounds. But if a wood boring beetle bores into that red oak and then goes and bores into that live oak has a very high chance of getting oak wilt, and that'll spread through root systems that are connected to other oaks, like that one in my neighbor's yard over there. So I don't know if the roots are connected, but I've seen thousands of acres of live oaks dead around Kerrville and Fredericksburg area from oak wilt transfer. So it's important, at least in my case, before I move on to my red oak tree, to sanitize that bit. I want to soak that bit, the entire thing, in a bucket of alcohol, a container of alcohol, something to make sure I'm not carrying that virus from this bit I've used in the red oak over to the white oak. You don't need a lot of tools to do this. It's pretty simple stuff. I'll try to post where I got the anchor bolts from, as well as the cable that I'm using. I'm probably using cable a bit more in size than I need to, but I also believe in trying to over-engineer stuff so that systems don't fail. So my perception of this is that I likely have a system that won't. If it does, I've learned my lesson and I'll go on to prototype 2. This is prototype 1. I think I forgot to mention is what you want to do as far as your angles or where to place your anchor points is your secondary anchor point for your supporting branch needs to be about really 2/3 of the way out for your anchor point. The reason I say that is you won't always have that opportunity, but if you go 2/3 of the way out, you're basically creating a cantilever system. A cantilever system will support where the anchor point is, but it lets a third of the structure hang over the edge. And that's a very good sturdy structural point. If we were to bring that back and only come a couple feet from the trunk to the branch, you could imagine all that massive weight out there would have no support. So if you can't get out to the last third of the branch, then at least try to get it at the halfway point. I've got some that are less than that, like that one there, but I had no choice in the matter. I wasn't willing to, extend up another 10 feet to get to the actual best placed to attach. An little oddity here. I'm supporting that branch and that branch up against the main anchor point, and I'm not supporting this branch. You might ask why. Well, that's why. It's so close to a supporting branch on the bottom that I just jammed a rock in there. A rock will allow that little weight point to kind of distribute down to this supported branch. You can see it's supported right. Where are you? There. Okay. So what'll happen too as this tree grows is the bark will overcome that rock as they start to grow together. So the rock is just a spacer. Could use a piece of 2x4, but that's going to rot. A rock will not. I've seen a lot of trees out in the country where, especially cedar trees, where they've grown up around rocks. Those are a booger to cut out of the ground too, and they've got rocks in them. Eat your chainsaw blades up. Anyway, I'll see if there's anything else to follow up with. Otherwise, this is the end of it. Hope you enjoyed it, and be safe.